Well, hello and welcome to the Dream Highway podcast, the show that's here to inspire you to go after your dreams and, most importantly, to make the most of the journey every step of the way. This is episode 71, and I'm your host, Steve Pedersen. And my guest today is Lori Pino. Lori is an author, holistic life coach, and healing artist from the San Francisco Bay Area. Her mission is empowering others to live on purpose with purpose. She has just published a book titled Haight Words, Voices from the Street, wherein she attempts to bring light to the depth of humanity existing before our eyes, the homeless in our communities, compelling us to draw on our own compassion and help bring voice to the silenced. Lori, welcome to the Dream Highway podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Honored to be here. Appreciate it.
Oh, for sure. It's so great to have you. I'm so glad you could take time out of your busy schedule. I know being an author is, being an author and an artist is very time consuming. It's, the creative process is very time consuming. So very grateful you could be here. Let me ask you this question right off the bat, because I know our listeners, they don't have the word right in front of them. And so I want to make sure that they know that the book is not HATE words. We're not talking about hate words here, right? Is that kind of a play on words? And maybe you want to describe a little bit about the title of your book.
Absolutely. I would love to. In fact, I have it in front of me. If I could show it.
Please do. Please do. Yeah.
So it is HAIGHT, Haight Words. And yes, it's definitely a play on words because it's based on, it's all about people who live on the streets of Haight Street in San Francisco, notorious, right, for Haight-Ashbury and the hippie movement and all kinds of things. But now, it's taken on a new meaning, and that's why I want people to kind of consider Haight Words as the words from people who actually live on the street of Haight.
Yeah. And this sounds like a fantastic humanitarian endeavor. One thing, there's just kind of a voice in the back of my head, because I'm thinking of my dad, and my dad, he was sort of pre-hippie generation. And so he was sort of down on the hippies, and I could just kind of hear him. Love my dad. He passed away about 12 years ago, but I can hear him saying, oh, it's because, all these hippies, and because they were hippies, they ended up on the streets. Of course, we have homeless all over the country, but, let me just ask you, is that something that you see was maybe sort of led into a lot of homeless in that area?
Good question. I haven't really thought about that until now. So I don't necessarily think it was a precursor to that, or, that it precipitated the homeless. There are so many factors. I mean, there are certainly drugs that come into play. And in recent years with the opioid crisis, that really amped it up. And we're looking at the pandemic, where more and more people are displaced economically, forced to different circumstances. So there's certainly a combination of factors that play into it, but I wouldn't lay it all on the hippie movement.
Right. Yeah.
That said, this is an anthology of writings from folks who lived on the street. So there are a good many of the writings of these folks who really were lured to Haight Street and to living on the street because they wanted to be a hippie. They wanted to kind of rehash that lore. So there is some truth to that, I think.
Well, and I think even on maybe a bigger scale, a grander scale, why did people go out to, so Haight-Ashbury, is it in now? I wasn't a hippie, so I'm not exactly sure. You say it's in the San Francisco area. Is that correct? I'm kind of showing my ignorance here about a very famous thing.
No worries. That's a great question. I mean, just to be specific. So Haight-Ashbury, right? It's an intersection of popular streets where artists would hang out, musicians and poets and that kind of thing, in San Francisco, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just before Golden Gate Park.
Okay.
And so it just intersects there right at the tip of Golden Gate Park. And so Haight-Ashbury is a very popular intersection to this day.
Got it. Yeah. And so I guess my thinking was like back in 1849, it was the gold rush that had people going out there sort of chasing a dream in a sense, right?
Yes.
And then in the 60s and 70s, it was that area that sort of drove people out there in search of a dream,
In
right?
search of.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and people are still drawn to the area for that very reason: a new life, new hope, exciting adventure, new
Mm-hmm.
dream.
Yeah. People are drawn to gold still these days, wherever the gold might be, in search of
Exactly.
their dream.
Yes.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I definitely want to come back and we'll talk more about the book, but let's just talk a little bit about the journey that you've been on in your life. Let's talk about a little bit, maybe about the dreams you had when you were younger and how that evolved over time, because I know a little bit about your story and there's some interesting twists and turns in there.
There are. Thank you. You know, it's hard to figure out where to start because I grew up in a military family, so that meant moving out around quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Every 3 years, at least, maybe every other year sometimes. But so, I've come from a nomadic life and a lot of transition, a lot of change, a lot of different dreams. I mean, at one time, I wanted to be a commercial artist. I didn't get the message that that was a viable way to make a living. So then I switched
As most of
to,
us didn't.
right.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to be a veterinarian. Uh, that that shifted because I'm just not really great at math.
Mm.
And although I love animals, so sometimes I look at my life and wonder, why wasn't I one of those people who knew right off the bat what they wanted to do,
Mm.
from age 10, and then they're off and running and
Yeah.
hitting it, but
Yeah.
my dreams changed, and so what that led me into, well, just following the path. My parents were very high on education, so I knew I was going to college. There was a lot of pressure for that.
Mm.
My dad, like obviously I said, it was in the military, so I was thinking, okay, one, if I went to an academy, then I could straighten myself out a little bit because I needed a little discipline. And it was free because they would pay me to go to school. And then it would be a little prestigious. And then I could follow in my father's footsteps. And
Mm.
then that would be it. I would be a career officer, right?
Mm.
So, I started out 17 years old. I got an appointment to West Point, United States Military Academy in New York. And that was just after the Education Amendments of 1972, which allowed women to enter into previously all male institutions, and of
Interesting.
course other aspects of that law too. So I was in the 6th class of women going into West Point, and it was incredibly exciting. It
Mm.
was, I'm more of a West Coast person, even though we traveled around a lot in growing up. It was mostly on the West Coast. So got over, to New York was a big deal. I won't
Mm-hmm.
go all into it, but let's suffice it to say I spent 1 year there. I was kicked out for, academic reasons,
Okay.
but there was so much more behind that, personal reasons that I just wasn't, that conflicted with my studies. So I wasn't able to
Sure.
stay.
So did you feel a
Yeah.
sense of like, I have these dreams, but they're just not realistic? It kind of sounds a little bit like that. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, they weren't realistic. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So after the academy, then I started searching. I went to different colleges. I started thinking about I started thinking about my purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is my life purpose? What is my dream? I was really scattered. I was, at the time I was dealing with growing up in the military wasn't a hindrance at all. It really, really helped me become very strong and resilient, which helped me later on because I was dealing with the failure from 2 major universities, in which case left me feeling like I was a dunce.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was dealing with sexual trauma from inside and outside the family.
Mm-hmm.
I was bulimic for decades. I was, not to paint a pity story, but I've had my struggles.
Yeah, reality.
Depression. I got into a relationship with all of this with a person who was admittedly a recovering alcoholic addict and dual diagnosis bipolar manic depression. And so that just exploded and turned my life upside down. At this point, by this time I had also become a civil rights investigator with the U.S. Department of Education. It's very proud of that. Shifted course into a way for the first time from any kind of connection to the military or government into being a counselor, and found more and more parallels in that kind of work. And of course, previously I did finally finish my education and get a degree in behavioral science and counseling psychology. So I wanted to apply that. So I had a sense that I was going, all right, in a completely different direction, more humanitarian.
And did you feel like at that point, did you feel like that was a little bit more like you had kind of gone through that what's my purpose thing, and this was more like you were owning it?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
definitely feeling like I was on the right path now. I was, and again, now it took me decades to get over being kicked out of the academy because I really, really wanted that. But again, it was in a completely different realm. It was not the direction I was meant to go in. I did a 180. I started going, the more counseling I did and the more my life was unraveling, found parallels. But then I found that I was also able to help people more because I could relate.
Yeah. And would you mind telling us just like approximately like how old were you when that shift started happening?
It was in my 40s.
Okay.
Really, it's much later on. And I knew then. And during this time as well, this whole journey, I was becoming more and more involved with my spiritual connection. And that was a 182,
Yeah. And what was it, this other transformation that sort of stirred that, or was there another impetus that kind of got you, exploring that spiritual journey a little bit?
There was another impetus, I think mostly because of my mother's genealogical work. Her lineage comes through Mexico. And so I was, staying on top of what she was finding. She found a healer, my great grandmother, great aunt technically, but that gets complicated. So anyway, a relative that was a curandera. She was a healer and well known.
Say that word again.
Curandera.
Curandera.
Yes.
And that's a Spanish word.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is a folk healer.
Okay. Fantastic.
Typically in the old days, more of the village healer. And so, then I started thinking about becoming more self-reliant and looking more into the practice and finding a teacher to lead me. I looked first inside the family. I didn't find anyone else that was carrying on the practice. And so then I found someone outside the family who, come to find out years later, we had more connections than we thought, not blood related, but other connections. So the spirituality, my faith really, really helped me on this path and find my dream, and my purpose, which I ultimately, came to believe is to help people, tap into their own inner wisdom to get through those challenges, those struggles, those things that keep them back, and really live intentionally, not just by the script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful. What would you say? I mean, I think you've talked a little bit about your script, but you mentioned the script. Do you feel like there's like sort of a general script that people get handed? What would that be like? What if I just came into this world and I was handed the script, what would it say?
I do. I think it involves so much, like gender roles,
Mm,
okay? Male, female, uh, and we're conditioned in different ways. And then, of course, as a female, you're conditioned to, uh, you know, to grow up and get married and have kids.
mhm.
So part of the script is having kids, making a family, having the house, the white picket fence, doing the corporate job, and being a solid money maker or homemaker, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people aspire to that, and they do that. I think I would venture to say most of us have done that or are doing that, but it makes you susceptible to going through the motions of life rather than living life
Mhm.
and doing what you truly love to do. So it involves a lot of compromise and sacrifice for a lot of
Yeah.
folks.
I'm starting to get an idea for the name of the podcast, Flipping the Script with Lori.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I can so relate to that script. It kind of sounds like another way of saying the script would be the American dream. I mean, what you're describing is the American dream to some extent. And I know for me and my family, my immediate family here, is that's been a huge script to flip, because primarily my wife is the one that she teaches. She's a math teacher, high school math teacher. So she's got, this quote unquote steady day job,
Yeah.
right? And I'm the one that's been home kind of with the kids and kind of doing my gigs on the side here and there. It's very much flipped, and it's been very difficult at times to knowing that, hey, you're a guy, you're the one that's supposed to be going out busting your butt, and you know um crazy stuff. So what would you say would be one of the biggest, well, let's do this first. Right now, what is the big dream that you would say you're going after?
I am in the process, going step by step toward having my healing arts center.
Okay.
I want to have a go-to place for people to have a safe haven, to heal, to grow, to learn, tap into their own wisdom and potential, and really do what they want to do in life
Mm-hmm.
without fear holding them back. I
Yeah.
want a place in the woods, near the water, where we can walk outdoors, we can contemplate these things that are coming up in people's lives, offer art, offer music, offer plants and healing and
Yeah. All right. I love this. So let's talk a little bit about how art and music and nature has a very powerful place in healing people.
right. And that's why I refer to healing arts.
Mm,
It's they are traditional um, means or disciplines that people have been using for, oh gosh, not even decades. I mean, millennia,
mm,
right? For,
mhm.
I mean, with the curanderismo, which is the folk healing practices, through energy work, Reiki. I do Reiki healing, which is an ancient Japanese hands-on technique, but also remote as well.
Mhm.
There are so many disciplines out there. I mean, yoga and all of those things. So, and music is part of it. Chiropractic is part of it. That's an art. Working with the body, working with the mind, the
Mm.
soul. So it's a matter of integrating all these different disciplines and aspects to help that person go to the next level for themselves.
And would there be like, how would a person know like what modality might be best for them? Do they just kind of know that intuitively, or are there like, is there an exercise or a practice or something that you can take them through and look for tells on, like, oh, this would really be a great modality for you? Is there something like that? Or
Right. Well, it's all about listening and holding the space for someone to express what is going on in their life, what they have on their plate, what they have struggled with, what they're, what has been with them for years or decades that they haven't been able to really shake loose from. It's looking at the whole person. So
Mhm.
it would be, me sitting with the person, talking, having a however long a discussion it takes sometimes to decide, well, is this where you're at now? Is that something that has to do with diet? How is your diet? Basic needs.
Mhm.
What is your rest like? Your relationships. So nutrition, all of that, exercise, activity, movement, and to then, synthesize all of that information and have, discuss the options with someone.
Mhm. Yeah.
Here's what's available. Here's what's possible. What do you think? What are you inclined to do? Where would you like to start?
Yeah. And do you notice when working with people if there's maybe like a sort of maybe not standard, but is there like a typical amount of time where it takes them to sort of have that breakthrough?
That's a good question, because it really varies. I would say, around the 6 month mark,
Mm,
working up to 6 months or so, there begins to be a transformation.
yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you said that, because especially I would imagine people need to go through some stuff in life. So, which is why I asked you how old you were. And it's interesting that you said in your early, or you're in your 40s. I was in my early 40s when I hit a wall, so to
Uh-huh.
speak, and realized that, okay, I've been going according to the script now for quite some time, and there's something not quite resonating. There's a lot of great things going on in my life, a lot of uh, yeah, wonderful things, but still some dissonance there. And so that it's not just a quick fix. It's not just, hey, we're going to get together for a breakthrough session. And, because you hear that a lot. You hear like, hey, I can, snap my fingers and set you free in a one session. It's just not that easy, is it?
It's not at all. And, I did mention my 40s, but it took until my 50s to really break through, to
Hmm.
really break the script.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where I think any of us who are not feeling fulfilled, there's a little tug year after year after
Mm-hmm.
year in the back of our minds. We know, or in my case, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could do what I really want to do, but I'm so
Mm,
scared to do that. And that's,
mm,
fear just is the crippler of so many dreams. And
yeah.
so it took really working through that and finally saying, and usually it's something, I think, and it could be deciding to make a physical move from the current location to another location.
Mm-hmm.
Even that is really difficult, but there's something that stays with you and it builds and builds and builds. And then there's a day and a moment where someone does something or says something and you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done. I am
Yeah.
done. I am going to do this. And then you make a commitment to do it and have all the faith in the world that you can, and you do it.
Yeah. And there might even be multiple things like that, but they are definitely those defining moments, right? Where it's like,
Right.
um, yeah, the straw that broke the camel's back kind of a thing, but there's a lot of camel's backs to be broken.
Right. Right. Which one is it going to be? And then
Yeah.
It reminds me of like when falling in love, and you ask your folks or somebody, how do you know when you fall in love? And they just say, well, you'll just
You
know.
just know.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, great. That's a lot of help. But then when the time comes, whether it's chasing your dreams or falling in love, you just know
Yeah.
it's time.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because I'm sure many people can relate to dating several people and, even, trying to make it work. I was in a few relationships like
Mhm.
that where trying to force this thing to work. And it was just like, no, when I finally met Stephanie, who is my wife now, it was just like, oh, duh. Yeah. Yeah. This is a no brainer,
Right.
and that's how it should be going after our dreams. It's like trying to force, even when you start dialing into how, like, maybe you're sort of aware, of what your dream is, like, hey, I've got these talents, these gifts, this sort of awakening, I want to be able to help people, but what specific kind of person do I want to help? How specifically do I want to help them?
Yeah.
And we can try to force different things to work, but if it's not just that no brainer, like, of course this is how I want to do it. um you had mentioned fears. Was there any particular or specific fear that you haven't mentioned already that was kind of holding you back from pursuing what you wanted?
Oh, probably. I guess, I really felt like I could do the work. And I'm thinking of my holistic life coaching, integrating the folk healing into that, and art and the book and the Reiki. I really, I feel confident about all of that. I'm just not sure how to get from point A to point B. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the meantime, you've got to have some kind of financial uh, cushion,
For sure.
and so I think that's, a lot of people could probably relate to that. And so that was my big worry or fear that crept in quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also very positive minded. So I've really, really stepped up my game in that realm
Yeah.
to keep it positive, because I do believe energetically we get what we put out there. So it's a working, constant working on the self,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's got to be the focus. So that's what's really helped me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that, I think, is um people want to go, or they want to go all in on their dream, and they feel like, well, I can't go all in on my dream if I've got all these other responsibilities. I got to pay the bills, the kids got to get to school. you
Right.
know but it's, yeah, I guess Rome wasn't built in a day is the thing that's coming to my mind right now, that um to at least take some action, consistent action, um every day, even if it's a little bit. um I mentioned right before we started recording that I had just gotten back. I actually just purchased a new bicycle, and
Okay.
the thing, so that's kind of fresh on my mind. So I'm thinking about, when you go on a bike ride is kind of like just one pedal at a time. You can't get to the top of the hill by just, hey, I'm just going to give it one big thrust and choo, it's going to launch me up there. It's just a little bit every step of the way. Fantastic. All right, let's get back to the specifics now about your book. And let's just talk a little bit about, or go deeper into why that came about for you. Why was this why were you so passionate about this particular project? And what are you hoping it will accomplish?
Right. It's 17 years in the making.
Hmm.
So talk about being prodded along.
Yeah.
It's so important to me, because from day one, and it's the reason I decided to do this work, is uh, personally and in my professional work and otherwise, I found a common theme. People want to be heard, they
Hmm.
want to be seen.
Hmm.
Very few people, in my opinion, have the ability to be a good listener. They're mostly for good reason, oftentimes focused on themselves and pretty self-absorbed. So this is about giving especially marginalized populations a voice. It started because I was out with my brother for dinner one night and, had some leftovers and stopped to give someone who was living on the street some leftovers. And that person in return gave us a couple of poems. And then I'm like, oh my God, I've always been partial to anyone who's on the fringe or marginalized or whatnot, because I've always been the one on the outside coming in and to new situations. So it's important for me to be there and help facilitate communication as much as possible. And so got the idea of collecting these writings, show the world, really, this book, is part of my mission to bring light to the way that we treat people. Anyone who's different, who seems different, who talks or looks different, or is living differently than us. It's time to put all that stuff to the side, that BS, that judgment, and give folks acknowledgement. So, I wanted people to get a different picture in their mind of the people that they're looking down on oftentimes on the streets, because they weren't always there. They had other lives. They still have aspirations. They're talented. They're artists. They're thinkers. They're philosophers. People need to know that. They need to take another look, and therefore, and ultimately, what I'm hoping is to take some kind of action. Any kind of action. I'm not an expert on our cities, municipalities, troubles and difficulties, and all the multitude of things that they have to deal with. I'm just saying, as one person, this was my way of reaching out and trying to uplift others and trying to affect some kind of change. Anyone else can do the same thing within their own power, if it's just a matter of buying coffee for someone. But most of all, acknowledging and listening and taking some kind of action.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, as I would imagine people might think, oh, I mean, that's just such a great, I'm so glad you brought, up the point that it's like, this is not where people started out. They didn't start out on the street. They, and I guess that's important, because I think sometimes people might think, oh, what could they possibly have to offer? Right. But you take a look at it, like what kinds of things have been stirred in your own soul just from looking at or their art or reading what they've written? How has that inspired you and just helped to see their humanity?
Well, there's so much love there. I mean, because I think looking from the outside into somebody else's situation, it's too easy to assume, oh, they must be so depressed, they're always high, or what, they must be feeling like a failure, or who knows, just projecting all these kinds of things, and mostly negative, when in fact there is so much hope there. There's so much love, there's so much compassion for each other, for other people. They see so much. They are the ground observers, witnesses, and they're presenting, they're portraying what they see, and it's so much more than we would imagine.
Yeah.
Is there positive?
Yeah. Sorry. Is there one particular, I know, we don't want to get into what, better, whatever, that kind of a thing, but is there any one specific poem or piece of work that you can think of a specific, like, oh my gosh, like this really had this kind of an impact on me when I saw this or read this?
There is one that kind of encapsulates everything we've been saying.
Okay.
Who who spells it out like it is. It's a woman who wrote a piece saying, just, I mean, I could read it, but I don't know if we have
Can
time for
you?
that.
Sure, go
Yes,
for it. Yeah, if you you got the book there right in front of you.
I
This is
do.
awesome.
Because to me,
Yeah,
it was like, this is why I wrote the book,
yeah,
you know, so based on what
absolutely.
she said.
Yeah, so this will be kind of like library corner time.
Okay, right.
Oh,
And so it's Mary Mick. This is the image. I don't know if you can see that
sure. So hold it still right there. So we've got, it looks like, is that a door or a mirror or like
it's like
a,
a storefront.
okay, a storefront? And
Mhm.
then, oh, I see. So there's like a woman who is very well dressed and she's sort of walking by and it looks like she's kind of ignoring a homeless person that's kind of sitting crouched down on the on the
Right,
cold hard concrete, right?
exactly.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Let's hear what
Like,
Mary has to say.
then, and I show that also just to, it's my illustrative response to the writing. So I did illustrations for each one.
Okay.
And so she says, do you ever stop to think about the people on the street? I mean, the people that stop you begging for change and your leftover food. Maybe all you see are dirty, outstretched hands and pathetic drunken sob stories. Bums sleeping on filthy sidewalks because they deserve it. Why don't you get off your ass and get a job, loser? Do you ever stop to think about the people on the street and what their lives were like before they started bathing in public restrooms and pushing all of their belongings around in a shopping cart? Maybe they once had everything you have or more. Maybe they were your next door neighbor or brother or mother. Maybe they had jobs or went to school or had children. Maybe they were good people that had something bad happen to them. Maybe they chose this lifestyle. No responsibility or bills. Who knows? Maybe they are just bums. Stop to think next time.
Mm, man. Wow. That's uh I feel it. I mean, I'm right there, you know, because I live in Chicago and
Mhm.
I live a little bit farther out from the downtown area. I used to work downtown and I was downtown every day and I saw a lot of these people that you're describing here. And this is incredibly powerful. I mean, this is wonderful. I mean, I hope this book goes to number one, you know. And
I would love that because it's not about me, it's about all of us. You know,
yeah,
it's about lifting us each other up and having humanity. And I'm sorry, but it gets me really choked up.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and because not only, I mean, we obviously see, you know, the physically homeless, but what about the spiritually and emotionally homeless, right? Like how
Right.
many people are suffering like that? And I mean, that sentence, like, hey, why don't you, you know, go get a job? You know, I mean,
Mhm.
but that's how we speak to ourselves sometimes,
True.
right?
Yeah.
Um, right. So when we're feeling emotionally or spiritually or mentally homeless, we can talk to ourselves just like you know, they're that conversation in that story that doesn't help anybody.
It's the worst. It's
Yeah.
the worst. I mean, for the way that we treat ourselves.
Hmm.
And that's why we treat other people the way we do. It comes from us first. And
Mm.
you know, and you mentioned something previously, like about the script and whatnot. And, you know, basically, if out of what I've experienced, I've come up with a little blueprint of my own
Okay.
to help people. And it's a program that I started called RISE. It's an acronym for recognizing your personal medicine, which is a Native American term or tradition and belief around the fact that we all come into this world with gifts and abilities and skills that are special and unique to ourselves. And it's a matter of recognizing them.
Mm.
Then it's a matter of integrating them. well, okay, I know I'm good at this and this and this, or I've always, had this special ability. Well, how do I apply it? So then you integrate it.
Mm,
And then the S is about supporting it. You cannot, and again, this, like you said, it's not overnight. You work at this. How do you support it? You meet your basic needs. You have to have your spiritual practice in place, some kind of, even if you're atheist. I mean, you've got some kind of belief system
mhm,
that drives you. And then the E is elevating and evaluating, because it's not work. And well, it all takes work,
mm,
but when you just find so many more benefits, and um, there's just so much more fulfillment when you are looking at how you're living your life on a regular basis,
mhm.
and taking yourself, and just having that integrity for yourself and respect for yourself, and bringing it to fruition. So
Yeah. Oh, man.
there is a way, but sometimes we can't do it by ourselves. We need help.
I think it was, I don't know. I mean, this kind of stuff is hard to prove or prove scientifically, but
Mhm.
I kind of think that that's how we were made. We're made to need one another to sort of evolve, to on a soul level, right?
Yes,
Um,
on a soul level, and
yeah.
that's part of my mission, is taking this out of the 3D, the third dimension, into the fifth dimension, into, away from the power over each other to the power within,
Mm,
and helping each other, and away from absolutes, and toward love and compassion. And we can do that. I personally think the pandemic is part of this, pushing a
mm,
reset on humanity and taking us to another world, a new world.
mhm. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll tell you this. If you have an event or something in San Francisco, I'd love to come and be a part of it. That sounds like a great time to me. I
I
can bring
do
my
too.
guitar and we play some music. I'd love to do some art. Um,
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome?
yeah. And here's the thing, like I believe, and I think we're kind of on the same. I think this is what you're describing, is that no matter where you're at, whether if you feel like you are, man, I am totally stuck. I don't think I can even, I think it's just too late,
Yeah.
honestly, for me to even start working towards a dream. I'm too old, I'm too far gone. I've had this thing happen, that thing happen, whatever the case might be. So sort of that extreme, or even the other extreme of like, man, I've been working this stuff for like you said, a decade now. Wherever you're at, there's always room for healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always room for those dreams. I
Mm,
don't care if you're 70 or 80, it's never too late.
yeah. Yeah. And there's, right, because society tells us like it's focuses so much on the youth, where it's like the older you get, the more stories you have.
Right.
you
It's
know
like aging wine. It's just
exactly.
more and more rich.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lori, this has been absolutely wonderful. I feel like this would be a great intro, and then we could like start talking about chapter one. Chapter one, I would really love to learn more about the whole just healing. This, how do you say it? The um, curandera.
Uh-huh. The tradition is curanderismo.
Okay, yeah,
Uh-huh.
we'll have to do another whole nother episode on that one.
Sure. I love it.
And see where that takes us. Okay, so you mentioned this rise thing. Is there some place people can go to find out more about that and more about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. You could email me at lori@loripinolifecoaching.com.
Okay.
Also, I have a Facebook group called Soulful Living Alliance, and
Okay.
that's where we entertain a lot of this. I bring in a lot of different tools and ideas around uh, personal growth, spirituality, really achieving your dreams. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, I will put all of that in the show notes. We'll link all of that up. People can go to thedreamhighway.com/71. Since this is episode 71, we'll have your email and Facebook and all of that stuff so people can get in touch with you there. Lori, thank you so much again for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Yeah, it's been great having you.
My pleasure. It's been great talking with you. I do have a book launch on November 6th if you want to make it.
Okay.
There's still time.
In San Francisco.
Across from San Francisco in Emeryville.
Okay.
It's on the water, little bayside town.
Okay. Man, that sounds like good times right there. All right. Well, Lori, again, thank you so much for joining you. We'll sign off for now. So long, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Dream Highway.
Thank you.